All right, let's roll. Is it the duty of the individual to resist tyranny? And underneath, I have the objective. And I just would like to introduce the concept of freedom and have people reflect on what freedom is worth to them and maybe learn how to identify a little bit of what a tyrant is and discuss the difference between a tyrant and a virtuous leader on the surface. All right, next. Wesleyan quadrilateral. All right. In my research, I found mainly that in my interpretation, it was meant to be used as like a toolbox, necessarily not just one mode for reflection, but reflect on one thing with all modes to get a kind of like a 4D like interpretation of what you're about to do. I mean, it's the best way to cover all the bases, in my opinion. All right, next. Each man is an island unto himself, but though a sea of difference may divide us, an entire world of commonality lies beneath. And then no man is an island, entire of itself. Every man is a piece of the continent, a part of the main. It disturbs me no more to find men base, unjust, or selfish than to see apes mischievous, wolves savage, or the vulture ravenous. All right, first quote. Every man's an island. He has his internal way of thinking. He has a way he sees the world himself because he experienced it through his eyes, right? But going on to the second quote, which is sort of a contradiction to the first one, which to me reflects how humans are contradictory in nature ourselves. You know, we're like walking contradictions. And, you know, what you do does affect other people. And if you care about other people, you have to see that. And then the last quote is kind of negative. I mean, in my opinion, this man, Jean Paul, is saying, hey, I'm not surprised when bad people are bad. And that's the truth. I mean, it's not surprising. It's surprising. Some people have a nature to destroy, whether that's been developed or however, you know. All right, that's just three quotes I found during my research that I thought kind of were an artistic way of like expressing the duality of people and our morals or ethics. And here is a picture I thought represented that last quote well. This is the market burning, I believe, in Dublin, if I recall correctly. You, a painting by Duncan, yeah, 1890. It was a violent incident. Good intentions, good reasons for why the mob was out there, but the mob can be dangerous. All right, tradition. That's the first angle we're going to hack at this subject with, utilizing the Wesleyan quadrilateral. All right, if we're going to reflect on tradition, we're going to have to stream from that first quote there, every man's an island, and you're going to have to see a little bit of what my perspective on tradition is. So here we go. I was born in Point Pleasant, West Virginia. Uh, it's an impoverished area on the Main, still is to this day. Coal mining country. That's what my family did. Um, I'm of mixed ancestry, I guess you could say. Here's a picture of my ancestors. They're from Hungary. They're Hungarian and Jewish. That's my great grandfather. He's Irish and Native American. Um, Here's some of my Native American ancestors. That's Latham Moore. She's African American and Native American. And this is one of my Persian grandparents and my adventurer, I guess, esque grandfathers. I'm not going to get in depth to the history and the genetic breakdown, but I was just trying to show that where I was born and partially grew up, I mainly grew up here in Florida. There was a not a lot of prevalent like racism, not really, just not a lot, and there was a lot of mixing of the people going on, especially in the coal camps and the coal camp areas, which is mainly where my family's from. But it's interesting to see how oppression and immorality mainly affected each of their lives. And you can see this part of my family did their best to try to, as I've been told, quote unquote, pass for white for reasons that should be obvious. And this family, these two people did not know each other. This was an arranged marriage, actually, and these are my great grandparents, my mother's great grandparents, and they came from Hungary in the early 1900s, escaping communism. Well, the early forms of Marxism and the early forms of the Communist Party in the what would now be called the Czech Republic. Back then, it was Hungary, and they had to flee as an entire family. All right. Now, this is a statue in Point Pleasant. It's of Chief Cornstalk, and this is a big part of tradition. Cornstalk was a Shawnee chief in Ohio County in the 1760s and 1770s. His name in the Shawnee language was Hoko Lesqua. Little is known about his early life. He may have been born in Pennsylvania. He led raids against the British Americans in the Pontiac Wars. He first appeared in historical documents in 1764 when he was one of the hostages surrendered to the British as part of the peace negotiations ending the Pontiac's War. Now, here's the thing. Cornstalk wanted peace. He realized that battle between his quote, his term, and a quote, red man and white man, this battle couldn't go on. There had to be some measure of peace. He offered himself as a hostage to negotiate peace, and in return, he was tricked and murdered. And the local legend says that he placed a curse on that area, which is now Point Pleasant. But he's an honored individual, and some people want his statue taken down, which I don't agree with that. It's a huge part of history, but he, he it's a part of tradition. This man's dedication to peace, he submitted himself to his enemies. He had killed the white man. He had been in battle with the British. He had seen his brothers, his comrades, his family, his tribe members die at the hands of redcoats, and he was willing to trust them and trust peace and give himself up. He was willing to give himself up for that's a big sacrifice, and I think that plays into the tradition of the area and myself immensely. All right, here we go. Here's the second part of my long diatribe on tradition and its influence. The Matewan Massacre. Now, the Matewan Massacre. After a rally on August 7th, Mary Harris Mother Jones, I don't know if you're familiar with the common publication Mother Jones, but it's named from her, called on the miners not to march into Logan and Mingo counties and set up the Union by force. Accused by some of losing her nerve, she feared a bloodbath in a battle between the lightly armed Union forces and the more heavily armed Logan County deputies. Union as a trade union, not Union in Civil War. This is modern 20th century. Yet, feeling Morgan had lied to them again, armed men began gathering at Lenz Creek Mountain near Marmet and Kanawha County on August 20th. 4 days later, an estimated 13,000 had gathered. This is men fighting for their rights, and began marching towards Logan County. Impatient to get to the fighting, miners near St. Albans in Kanawha County commandeered a Chesapeake and Ohio freight train, renamed by the miners the Blue Steel Special, to meet up with the advance column of marchers at Danville and Boone County on their way to Bloody Mingo. During this time, Keeney and Mooney fled to Ohio, which, while the fiery Bill Blizzard assumed quasi leadership of the miners. Now, it's, I don't want to get into a big I just wanted you to see how many men were involved in this. 13,000 is no. They're stealing freight trains. They're doing this because their families are being evicted from their homes. They're being thrown into the streets by public officials and company leaders that are abusing their power. This is these are poor people, and as you can see by these pictures, their working conditions were poor. And as you can also see, to what I alluded to earlier, as the different races working alongside together and living alongside together, it was not uncommon. If you want to learn more history about the Matewan massacre, I encourage you to read it. And there's a movie. It's fictionalized, but it's called Matewan. You could watch it. It stars James Earl Jones. This is a big part of American history that's really skipped over, and the mine workers of the Appalachians are one of the most downtrodden people, and they have many times had to fight just to live. And as you can see, these men are gathering firearms to fight the government. And here's the newspaper of the time. Air Fleet ordered to West Virginia battlefield. Yep, it was the only time ever that bombs were dropped, respectively, on United States citizens. This is the 20th century. All right, here we go. Here's Mother Jones. That's Mother Jones, and this is the leader of the Logan County Miners Rebellion. That's Sid Hatfield, actually, and we all know who this is, Gandhi. And this is James Connolly. Seamus O'Connolly. I'm sure if you're of Fenian descent, then you know who this is. Um, the female is Mary Ann Shadd Carey, somebody I really look up to. She was an American Canadian anti slavery activist, journalist, publisher, teacher, and lawyer. She was the first black woman publisher in North America and the first woman publisher in Canada. She was also the first black woman to attend law school in the United States. Mary Shadd edited the Provincial Freeman, established in 1853, a published weekly in southern Ontario. It advocated equality, integration, and self education for black people in Canada and the United States. Mary's family was involved in the Underground Railroad and assisted those freeing slavery. After the passage of the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850, her family relocated to Canada. She returned to the United States during the Civil War, where she recruited soldiers for the Union. She returned to the United States during the Civil War. I mean, that's sacrifice. That's pure sacrifice. That's virtue. And it's a tradition for her family. I mean, these are leaders that some of us or all of us look up to, and that is part of our traditions. And it, to me personally, it has shaped how I've seen the world since my earliest childhood years, witnessing mobs fighting over work in West Virginia, scabs fighting union, people's cars being burnt, people's homes, jacks on the road, which I'm not going to get into discussion with those are, but violence. I mean, the lack of work, the lack of good jobs, scabs and union, that creates conflict. And it takes men that are will and women that are willing to sacrifice. It takes virtue, and we can build on that tradition. All right, here we go. Here's the antithesis of the previous people that we just viewed. I'm not going to get really big. I don't want to glorify these guys. You should recognize them. That's Hussein and that's Putin, and well, he's an enemy of the state of Israel and Americans in general, I would say. But I guess that could be debated. These men do not sacrifice for themselves. These were the type of men that tortured, that hurt, that maimed, that kill the innocent without a thought, just for their personal advancement. Saddam Hussein was a tyrant. He killed over 1 million of his own people. To quote New York Times, enemies of the state are eliminated, and their spouses, adult children, and even cousins are often tortured and killed along with them. Mr. Hussein even used Stalinist maxims, including what an Iraqi defector identified as one of the dictator's favorites. Quote, if there is a person, then there is a problem, period. If there is no person, comma, then there is no problem, end quote. Saddam Hussein. I mean, that is a tyrant. That is the embodiment of a tyrant. Now, we're looking at a modern day tyrant right here, a young Putin. And I'm sure that my wife would have a lot to discuss on why he's a tyrant, but we'll leave that for another day. Here's a tyrant from antiquity. Um, let's see, what is tyranny? Uh, well, tyranny is cruel, unreasonable, or arbitrary use of power or control. Another definition is a nation under cruel and oppressive government. Even another way to describe that in action would be a dictatorship. This is all according to the Merriam Webster Dictionary. Very standard yet powerful terms. And, you know, let us start on the list of tyrants with Oliver Cromwell. Um, we could judge him by his actions. During his capture of Drogheda, he massacred 3,500 people. At the siege of Wexford, he killed 1,500 civilians. Cromwell also shipped many Irish to the West Indies to be slaves. I would say those actions would qualify as a cruel use of power. This was done on behalf of the English Parliament, a form of government. Quote, while gentry and merchants, Catholic and Protestant, set out for the Caribbean to become 147 planters, the majority of Irish arriving there in the 17th century came as bonded labor. These servants, who continue to haunt Irish memory as white slaves and political transportees, arrived in Barbados and Jamaica, as well as in the Leewards. Barbados, rather than the most disturbed Leewards, emerged as the Stuarts' most valuable Caribbean colony, first producing tobacco, then in the 1640s switching to sugar. Irish Migration Studies in Latin America, Rogers and Nini. I mean, that right there itself had an impact on my genetic and ethnic makeup, which arguably could have had an impact on how my mind works. If you believe genetics has an effect, on temperament, and the effects of tyrants can be long reaching past the actual damage they've done. There's no justification for taking away individuals' freedom in the guise of public safety, Thomas Jefferson. In my personal experience, right, okay. In my personal experience, resistance to oppression can often be very unsafe. Those with power, if they have enough malicious intent, will do untold damage in their endeavors to hold on to that power. We're talking about the tyrants we were identifying before. They will dehumanize the oppressed. I have personally witnessed this in Afghanistan with the Pashtun people. It is a constant chain of oppression and desperation with the warlords at the top. Experience. That's the next little tool we're gonna pull out that we're using. That's what those quotes were speaking to. This is my personal knowledge, my experience. In my personal experience, resistance to oppression can often be very unsafe. Those with power, they can be malicious. Oppression can be more subtle, though. Would it be oppressive to deny a man a working wage due to a religious observance? Is firing a man or woman for holding different religious views than I not wrong? Now, personally, through experience and relevant to today's climate, I believe the vaccine mandate was a form of political oppression. I do not believe that it was moral, practical, or constitutional. I have no clue how people accept our executive branch to just make and implement quote unquote laws all on their own. A, a mandate implemented in such a way is just a decree, and that's what tyrants do. And here's some pictures from my experience. Here's some of these warlords at the top, and here's the bottom. These kids were asking me for pens. A pen to a child in that environment was the most valuable thing you could, like, could you imagine being a kid and all you want is a pen? You know, tyranny, you can see it when it's in action because the people at the top will appear to be happy and living a good life, and just look at how the people underneath them are living to see if it's fair or not. We have established that our ethics, anti-ethics, liberty, anti-liberty. I would say, in my opinion, undoubtedly yes. There's people that use their talents to sacrifice virtuously for the greater good. They gain experiences through this, and then it becomes traditions, you know? And there's the people that are the embodiment of the opposite of that. They destroy those traditions, they strip those liberties, they deny people those experiences, you know? And it's an ideological state of mind that can influence a person's thoughts and actions. Just the same as liberty being personified herself, anti liberty, her sister, can be called into being. What is anti liberty's motto? It is for the children, is her cry. I jest, but this is so.
So you have to be ready to take a punch. You got to be ready to take a punch. And therefore, you have to be ready to throw a punch for the children. Throw a punch for the children.
Reason. To me, reason is the basis. Just by being and having conscious thought, I have the ability to reason, and it's the greatest gift. And using reason, which I would hope that justice is based on reason, and I would hope that the Supreme Court of our land would use reason in their rulings, and that we would use those rulings to apply it, and that would therefore be justice. And according to John Yu at Dallas Morning News, both the eviction moratorium and the vaccine mandate raise the question of Congress's delegation of authority to administrative agencies. Reviewing courts will ask whether the president can order, like tyrants order, a measure of this magnitude, something that impacts a lot of people. And impact without receiving specific congressional approval. Let's just skip that whole republic process. If the eviction moratorium case is any guide, the Supreme Court will look suspiciously on any Biden administration effort to distort an unrelated law into a nationwide public health mandate, even in the midst of a dangerous pandemic. And that taps into the Jefferson quote before. Um, Even if the vaccine mandate fell within the OSHA law, the Biden administration's order would still violate fundamental constitutional principles. The Constitution's grant of limited is the key word there, enumerated powers. That's the next keyword, enumerated, listed. As in, they're already you can't just make new ones on your own. To the national government does not include the right to regulate public health under Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. Congress enjoys the authority to regulate Congress with foreign nations and among the several states, and other great grants of powers include the power to tax and spend for the general welfare, enforce constitutional rights, set foreign policy, and protect our border and national security, which, in my opinion, the border part they're skipping. All right, Robert Tracy reported that in a 6-3 decision, the Supreme Court held that the Occupational Safety and Health Administration overstepped its authority by seeking to impose the vaccine or test rule in all U.S. businesses with at least 100 employees. Quote, OSHA has never before imposed such a mandate, end quote. The court noted, begin quote, nor has Congress indeed, although Congress has enacted significant legislation addressing COVID-19 pandemic, it has declined to enact any measure similar to what OSHA has promulgated here. They acted without the authority of Congress. That's what a despot or a tyrant would do. Ideologies cannot overtake and overrule the process of democracy and a representative republic, or there's no point in doing it. Now, take for example the trucker protest in Ottawa that is currently happening. I guess it might be coming to an end now, but I believe it is Canada wide now, and may even start in the USA, which the mainstream media hasn't covered a lot, but it's there. Many of the participants are in fact vaccinated, and they're completely pro-vaccine. Yet they also feel that they should stand up for the rights of those that choose not to. It's their choice. It is not their duty. They choose to stand for others. To me, that's what makes it so much more special. Liberty in the land of the USA was an experiment in trust. Trust of the people in each other at the same time who shared the same convictions and the support of those that were on the fence. About 45% of the population supported the American Revolution, which, you hear the 13% a lot. And according to my research, that's actually not true because that's only regular soldiers they're counting. I put that research in the works cited. Uh, but that's still under a majority. The founders trusted us to keep this experiment going. It is not perfect, but it's the best this world has. I can't back that last statement up with empirical data. All I have to go on is what I've seen of this world from one end to the other. And I will say, personally, that the USA is unique because we have the choice, and often we do choose to stand for each other. I mean, my point is no one should be able to make you take a medication or have a medical procedure forced on you, especially by threat of any kind, whether it be monetary or physical. Bypassing legislators and enforcing a mandate with the threat of losing your livelihood is tyrannical. Am I saying you are a bad person for getting the jab? Absolutely not. Even if you think everyone else should, that is your opinion. I respect that. When you start to force others through persecution, ostracization, poll taxes. This is when I have the issue. I honestly could not find any hard statistics for how many people have lost their jobs due to the vaccine mandate. The general consensus is that 5% of unvaccinated adults have. First, I find it hard to believe that they know the true number of unvaccinated adults in the U.S. because, according to CNN, 6,000 illegal immigrants are caught at the border daily. So who knows how many unvaccination cases, how many cases of COVID, what strains we have. The duties of our government are enumerated in national security. The border is up there. And I agree COVID 19 is something that needs to be dealt with. I'm not a science denier, I'm not a COVID denier. I'm not for the experimental vaccines. I need to see more research. I need to see more efficacy. But you can't force it on somebody because you think it might make you safe. Freedom is dangerous, but tyrants are more dangerous. And where does it go? Where does it lead? I had reasons not to want this world to have meaning, and as a result, I assumed the world had no meaning. And I was readily able to find satisfactory grounds for this assumption. For me, It is undoubtedly was for most of my generation. The philosophy of the meaningless was an instrument of liberation from a certain moral system. We were opposed to morality because it interfered with our freedom. Hmm. Scripture. In the chapters of the Fathers, 428, Rabbi Elazar Hakapar says, jealousy, lust, and honor remove a person from the world. What does this mean? One explanation is that these things color a person's vision. Instead of dealing with the real world, he or she instead sees the world from a distorted perspective. And of course, this unrealistic perspective limits the person, preventing him or her from doing things which otherwise would be entirely possible and appropriate. The victim is shackled, regardless of his or her self perception. And it says, and the tablets were the work of God, and the writing was the writing of God, graven upon the tablets. But as it reads in Hebrew, Harut is also freedom. So you could say freedom was written on the tablets, or the way to freedom was written on the tablets. Exodus 32:16. For there is no free man, but one that occupies himself with the study of the Torah, the Mishnah of Vat 6:2. Now, for me, the scripture, which is a tenet of the Wesleyan Quadrilateral, and he was a Methodist uh, by practice. It for me it feeds into ethnic tradition. So for me, tradition, morality, ethnicity, and scripture are bound, and they started with oral tradition that were prescriptions for health, spiritual, and legality, which are two separate things. Rabbi Joseph B. Soloveitchik observes the most amazing thing about Exodus, far greater than the signs and wonders, is the transformation that occurred to a nation of slaves. Slaves do not understand the idea of obeying laws when no one taskmaster threatens them. Therefore, why would a slave obey the commands in our parasha, such as matzah, such as korban pesach, such as you will not break a bone of it, or such as you may not leave over any of it until morning, if no taskmaster is threatening? And that's true. You know, here's a painting of it, the Exodus. I, oh, it's not a painting. Uh, here's I don't know, a piece of art. Um, yeah, why would you, after being a slave, why would you want rules at all? Uh, it's the choice. It's the choice. They chose something that they believed would be the ultimate way to freedom. And they chose something that, in that goal of ultimate freedom through Hashem, through God, our Creator, you know, uh, you could ultimately make the world a better place as well. That you don't have to fear uh, your fellow man and what he's going to do if he's going to vaccinate or not, because he has your best interests in mind for you as well. And we achieve this world through giving each other the experience, you know? And we build these traditions by giving each other these positive experiences repeatedly and through many generations. And you can't do that if you don't have more generations, and you can't do that if you don't have elders to listen to, elders who have more experience to help you read the laws, to help you read the quotes and the texts on ethics and morals and modes of reflection, um, to disseminate, to dissect these ideas, I mean, and really get the juice out of them. I mean, freedom is the ability to discuss what we're discussing right now openly, you know, and we can judge each other. And we can even insult each other. We're free to do that, you know? We can't harm each other, we can't harass each other, but you're in when you enter the public discourse, you're in danger of your feelings being hurt. And you danger hurting the feelings of others. That's a social contract that we're making, you know? And I agree politeness is important, but I would really rather skip superficial politeness and get straight to building the traditions and giving each other the experiences. And as far as religion goes, I doubt that we'll ever all agree on one for everyone or none for everyone. And as far as reason goes, that's up to each individual. And on that note, I will try to wrap this up because my kids are beating on the door. Modes of reflection. The two methods of reflection that I used were erotology and teleology. Our rights were bestowed by our Creator. The scripture I quoted shows how a balance between rules and natural born rights are the key to a happy and fruitful society. Although your freedom is the duty of only yourself, the safety of yourself and your family falls on you. The, steward- the stewardship of your property is your responsibility alone. If one were mainly rely on the mode of deontology to solely conclude, then they may say that honor binds you to complete action and opposition in the presence of tyranny. In my reflection, that cannot be the case. Virtue dictates that freedom be a choice. If it is not a choice, then it is worth nothing. If you have no choice, then you are a slave. And I'll leave you with these questions. Um, is Justin Trudeau a tyrant? Did he abuse his power uh, when he used, and in my opinion, abused the Emergency Powers Act to silence peaceful protests? And I mean, those protests were incredibly peaceful. And fun fact, she's the granddaughter of a Nazi. 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 years from now, Leonidas declared, men 100 generations yet met unborn may for their private purposes take a journey to our country, Sparta. They will come, scholars perhaps, or travelers from beyond the sea, prompted by curiosity regarding the past or appetite for knowledge of the ancients. They will peer out across our plain and probe among the stone and rubble of our nation. What will they learn from us? And on the same note, what will they learn from us collectively as a people, as our nation? What will they learn from you as an individual? And what it comes down to is your choice. And I really appreciate you guys bearing with me and listening to this. I'm sure really boring presentation. And I thank you for your time.